Hello everybody, this is a Lamley showcase previewing the very first mix from Car Culture, Hot Wheels Car Culture in 2026. And it is significant in a million different ways. This is Japan Historics 5, the 5th iteration of Japan Historics in Car Culture, the 5th iteration of the very first mix of Car Culture, the first mix of 2026, and the first mix of the 10th anniversary of Car Culture. Hot Wheels is leaning in this year to celebrate 10 years, obviously because it's a very successful line, and I think internally because a premium line has finally hit 10 years. They seem to come and go, but Car Culture landed in 2016 with Japan Historics 1, and that's what we call it now, and it has been a dominant and defining line for Hot Wheels ever since. I've said it before, if I could only keep one line from Hot Wheels, and that includes Super Treasure and Basic, RLC, whatever, it would be every mix of Car Culture. I just love the direction. We could talk about the theme. Every mix has a theme. It can be everything from like this, classic Japanese cars, to pickup trucks, to Toyotas and everything else. I'll showcase these cars, we'll open them up, and then the second part we'll move into the studio and we're going to compare all 5 mixes and kind of use that to define where we're at with Car Culture. The first thing, let's just go one by one, and we will just kick it off with the chase. And this is also, if you've noticed and you haven't heard yet, this isn't a black chase. This is I'd call it gold. I think that's what it's meant to be. A gold chase, a satin gold chase of the Datsun 510 wagon. So there's a couple different things. Number one, it's gold. Everything else has been black with the exception of Roxy, and we've talked about why that Roxy Porsche was a chase. Hot Wheels has talked about that. It is also something interesting in that it is not a chase version or a special version of an existing model in the mix. There is no Datsun 510 wagon. So if you were to open up a case or go to the store and see this chase, there's no regular version of the 510 wagon to replace it. This is something they're doing just this year. Gold chases are just this year. My assumption is that they're going back to black chases in 2027. But to celebrate this year, they're doing a separate chase, and I think they will return to the chase version of an existing model in the mix, if that makes sense. So it'll be a little different this year with this, and how they're going to do it, there will obviously, I think there's 8 mixes typically. There will be 8 chases, and they will represent the most popular cars of the history of Car Culture. So you go back to Japan Historics 1, the Datsun wagon was the premier casting at the time, or close to it, and so that's what they're celebrating here. The next mix, Hill Climbers, I think is what it's called, will have the 55 Bel Air Gasser, which is also very popular. And if you start going back in the history of Car Culture, you'll start realizing, oh yeah, that makes sense. I kind of know what's coming. I mean, I've asked, they've winked, and not told me specifically what's coming, but you can kind of put it together. I'm assuming we'll see the Liberty Walk R34. I'm assuming we might see Roxy or Rexy, or that casting at least. There's a bunch of others. I mean, if I went through it, and when we go through Car Culture, we'll probably be able to figure that out. All right, that is the chase. I'm not going to open it because I have a purpose for this one coming up, but we can put it on the turntable because I have the turntable image that I took at the Hot Wheels convention with the Hot Wheels team when we did the sneak peeks. So you can look at this. You can see the satin gold. You can see the gold 4 spokes. My assumption is all of these chases will be fairly clean with the 10th anniversary Car Culture logo on it. They'll be gold with some sort of gold trim based on the gasser that we've seen. It's the same style here, I think, with maybe an outline of a flame. But it'll be cool to see how these chases turn out. So that's number 0. We'll talk more about that later. Let's go to number 1, and this is the Nissan Skyline 2000 GTR Liberty Walk. Skyline 2000 GTR, this is the Ken Mary Skyline. We have seen a Ken Mary before in the very first mix of Japan Historics. We'll talk about that. This is the Liberty Walk version. So one thing that's interesting is if you look at the art here, you can see that that's it's a modified Japanese car. Well, by the way, I think we're going to see gold cars with black background on the chase cars, but let's talk about the art here because we haven't done this yet. We got a new logo for Japan Historics 5. There's the 10th anniversary Car Culture logo. Very Japanese in its art and motif. I'll just show you the back. There's the 5 cars. They do not show the chase in that. And then there is that. I'm assuming this will come out soon after Timeless Icons. Let's talk about the art from Japan Historics. You know, when I say this, when I showed you this one, when Car Culture first launched, as you can see the logo here, it was on the smaller card. Julian Coyles did this art. I think he did the first 4. And if we want to rank the art, there's the first one. You see Mount Fuji. You see cherry blossoms. I love the car in color, animated, kind of this animated version with the black and white background, which is quite beautiful in that one. I mean, I think this is a very, very cool art. So when you look at Japan Historics 2, similar in that a color car, the car's in color, animated with a black and white background. You can see the cherry blossoms are kind of there. This is in the 50th anniversary. We'll talk about the line itself, but that art is quite pretty. I'll put that right here. Somewhat similar, but there's some differences there, and obviously we're the bigger card at that point. Japan Historics 3 really changed the look. You've got maybe more of a Tokyo. Now, you know, the backgrounds were a little bit different. I don't have every card here. Well, actually, those are the same. I wonder if they were all the same. But you had, again, color with some kind of a, it's not necessarily black and white background, but a very different look, more realistic in the art with, you know, it looks kind of like a Tokyo background. Not as good. I think the JH3 logo is very nice. And then Japan Historics 4, you return to some more classic Japanese art motifs. Kind of interesting. I have 2 here. How this, I don't know if this necessarily translated this kind of, I think it's supposed to look like a Japanese print, but it almost looks like a bad copy, like a bad printing. It doesn't totally translate, I think, the way it would hoped. I like the layout. It's pretty nice. One of the cool things that they did for this one is put the cars in Japanese instead of the English name of the car. So that was a kind of a cool detail. But if you go, I think that's beautiful. I think, and then, well, then we look at the art here. You're following the same style here. Everyone has the same background, I think, and yeah, so very similar in that. I honestly think, and I hope it's not just because it's the newest one, I think that's the best art. The angle of the car is beautiful. The animation or the illustration of the car is beautiful. You still get Mount Fuji in the background. The rising sun is there. Cherry blossoms are there. You get the color. I don't know. I just think this is the best art of all. I would put this number 1. I'd probably put Japan Historics 1 as number 2, 3, 4, and 5. I just don't think this one worked quite as well. And maybe you guys can tell me the same. So there is the artwork. I mean, we're going to go in a million different directions. Let's get right back to it. Okay, so we've seen the art. I think it's quite pretty. This is the Nissan Skyline. The thing I was going to point out is that is a factory rear end, Skyline rear end, the 4 lights of a Ken Murray Skyline. This model is the Liberty Walk version, the modified version. So one thing in the future, you have the old version. It's a Junimai did it. We'll talk about that later, but love the silhouette of this one. I would love to see them maybe modify this to make it more of a factory style, but let's just open it up. They obviously should have opened from the bottom, huh? Maybe I'll do that on the next ones. But here it is. Casting that we have seen a few times, right? It was debuted in Basic, moved to Premium in Team Transport in that signature Liberty Walk blue. We've seen it in Advan. We've seen it in white as part of the diorama set. I'm trying to think if we've seen it in any other Premium versions, but this one is very beautiful in the dark blue with kind of the copper, I don't know if you would say that, copper colored or bronze colored rims. I think it's a very, very nice version. My one complaint is, you know, while very Japanese in its modifications that Liberty Walk did here, I would like to see it in more of a classic. And slammed is fine, but, maybe just a little bit more factory. Okay, that's number 1. Let's go to number 2. And you're starting to see, and we're going to talk about these mixes, but here's the Toyota A86 Sprinter Terreno, really clean as well. Artwork's fabulous. Watanabe rims, which is appropriate on this model. For a while, they didn't have the small ones. Ouch in the back. I think this is based on someone's car, and I can't remember. Maybe if I can mention it later, or the Hot Wheels team will tell me. Put this right here. And here it is. Another casting that we have seen so many times. And I don't think there's been a dud yet. We've seen drift versions. We've seen, obviously, the initial D version that was only in Japan as part of a subscription. We've seen Advan. We've seen just plain white. We've seen, and obviously in the basic range as well. I know I'm missing quite a few. It's been in Car Culture a few times, and it looks really cool here in this color. Carbon fiber hood on it, just super clean. An appropriate model for Japan Historics. And again, as we talk about the history of Japan Historics, I'll kind of talk a little bit more about how these layouts, and I think there's some mixed opinions on them, on the assortments of these cars. Okay, that was number 2, right? So where's number 3? Well, it's a new model. It is the only new model, 77 Toyota's Celica. Very welcome to see this car done by Hot Wheels, one that I'm surprised we haven't seen yet. Let's open it up. So one new model in this casting, or in this mix. Put that over there, and this thing is super, super cool. We've got side mirrors. We've got, obviously, it's done beautifully proportioned with the small rims. I think moving forward, there was a time where they didn't have this size of rims, so the cars like the Ken Mary, like the Hakosuka, couldn't have the small rims. That was what June was working with way back when, but at this point, they really have. I mean, the details on these and the proportions on these are near perfect with these smaller rims. Just really, really dig this casting. Love the color. I'm a little fearful that this debut version doesn't pop as much as maybe it should, but it's still very much a lean into true car culture on these. And this is something about Japan Historics that I'll talk about as we go through these mixes. We can all say JDM was hype, and there's a very much a hype element, at least in the Hot Wheels world, to this. You know, there's not a Skyline that Hot Wheels didn't like, and there's not an R34, R33, R32 that Hot Wheels didn't want to make. That is for sure. I believe it, but we gobble them up, so why wouldn't they? But there's something about this line, Japan Historics, where they kind of, you know, obviously there's Skylines, but it's a little different, you know, and it's a little bit of like a nerd lean in, like a true car aficionado lean in with a lot of these cars. Okay, so that was number 3. Where's number 4? How about the Datsun 620? We have not talked about this casting. There was a time that this was a hype casting. It is not anymore, I don't think. So kind of a perfect time for Hot Wheels to release a very clean, I can use the word plain on this one, and plain in a good way. Interesting that the artwork has white embossed dots in it. It's black on that, but maybe the white didn't work. Let's open it up. This has been in Car Culture before, 620, maybe once in one of the very early mixes. I'm going to put this right there. But I'm going to say, not since the first edition in Basic have we seen this casting look this good. Like little racing versions or shop versions. The JDM Legends shop version is actually quite cool. But this is how the Datsun 620 should look to me. And it may have run its course as a casting. It's still really clean and really, really nice. And this is the best it's looked. It just needs to look like this, right, in my view. And it's just nice and clean, really, really well done version of that. And then finally, from this, and then we'll go to the second portion of the video, the 88 Honda CRX. This one was a little bit of a surprise in this, and I'm assuming there's obviously this car was on the road in the United States. Where this fits in JDM culture, I have no idea. I mean, obviously it's a Japanese car, but these I can see, especially these 3 right here. This one is a little bit different, but I'm happy to see it here, and it's a nice, we've seen some Hondas in the Japan Historics as well, so very cool. This I think was a basic model. I think this is the first time, maybe Ron and I talked about this in the sneak peeks, I think this is the first time we're seeing it as a premium. Perfect wheel choice, nice factory design, trim, color, everything else. All of these have just a very, very clean look. And this Honda CRX is no exception. I think in the original Modern Classics, we saw the old first generation CRX casting that I think Rio was always trying to fix. This one, though, I think he did, and he did it. I think it's just pretty perfect, and it's nice to see it as a premium. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then, of course, 6. It's a nice mix. But how does it compare? This, you know, we'll talk about this. In fact, there it all is. We'll move into the indoor studio so we can look at these a little bit clearer with the other mixes of Japan Historics. But before I go at this nice fall background, very not a spring cherry blossom at all, but good colors. Those are fall colors there, right? I do like the way this is done. I just don't know if this will sell the way other castings that are really hot right now will, but this is a passion mix. Classic cars done in very classic decos in very classic colors and not terribly showy. And I think a lot of times we as collectors will complain when they do too many hype stuff, but then we will also complain when they do stuff that we perceive as boring and there's no middle ground. I think this might be to some on the boring side, but it's such a stunning, beautiful, classic mix. And, you know, considering the people I saw at JCCS a month ago, oh my gosh, they'd go nuts for this mix. And that's what I really like about this. There's kind of nothing like it. So let's go through that, because that's kind of the theme of Japan Historics as we go through this. We're going to rank the mixes. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, let's walk through all of these mixes, all 5 of the Japan Historics mixes here in the studio, and kind of see how they reflect really the bookends of car culture, kind of the good and the bad too, and how this is such a lean in to car culture premium as well. I'll walk through these very quickly. I have them carded and loose. The number 1 of the Japan Historics, now referred to as Japan Historics 1, 71 Datsun 510 wagon. This is the time when the 510 wagon was legitimately probably the most popular, the most sought after casting of anything. It was in basic and premium. This is the 4-spoke version of that. Number 2 was the Nissan Skyline 2000 GTR. You can see this is also showing kind of like, you know, you had at the time 4 existing castings that all started essentially as basic. The 510 wagon started in Boulevard, but these models were then converted into premium. That was typically how it went. These were basic models made to premium. There were some exceptions to that. But as car culture leaned in, we saw more and more premium new models emerge in car culture. I think the budget obviously increased because we're buying more. But yeah, you saw this like working with the wheels that they had. If this Ken Mary were done later, which it was, you would see this more accurate proportion, the smaller wheels. But this is what June had to work with. You had to base it on the wheels. This is the size they had. The 4 spokes were introduced with this mix in premium, so that was kind of cool. Then you had the Toyota 2000 GT in a racing livery. This does not want to stay up. And, you know, and you can also see that when they first introduced this, you can tell they didn't have all of the confidence in the world as they released this to see if it would work, because they made this kind of a mid-level premium line, so you didn't get all of the details. Obviously, the taillights would have been done here, but this was like in the $2.50 range, so they had metal chassis and reel riders, but not a ton of detail, a little bit more than you'd see in basic, but not much more. Reflected very much, well, I didn't even put that there. I didn't even show you the Ken Mary, that was in the, or the Hakosuka, the Nissan Skyline HD 2000 GTX. You can see this one, obviously metal chassis, reel riders, but no details on the front, no details on the back. And yeah, this is pretty similar to a basic deco, you know, little bit elevated, of course, but maybe a few more colors, but not $5 at the time premium like pop culture. And then the one new model introduced, and I think not all mixes at the time introduced new models, was the Mazda RX-3 with the chrome 4 spokes, which was really kind of cool as well, you know. But again, we might have seen the wheels done a little bit differently because they had to base this on the basic wheels. So that was Japan Historics 1. A few years later, we go to Japan Historics 2. All right, Japan Historics 2. Now, this was significant because this was the first mix to get the larger premium card, and obviously more real estate for art. much cooler looking card art, of course. And, you know, very much a lean in into Japanese culture as well. These other ones, like I said, they were very close to like more basic. The Advan livery, I mean, there's a little bit more detail on them, but these looked a lot like basic models, to be honest. You know, the way the tampo doesn't wrap around, it's just kind of like there's gaps in the tampo and things like that. All of a sudden, these mixes had more premium. I think this was the first time that they did the all-around detailing. So you had 2 new castings, so more budget there. You had more budget into the card. You had a full detailing. So tail lights, headlights, wrap around. Obviously, there's not a lot of tampo on this, but you know, you have side tampo. Whatever they wanted to put tampo, they did. And upgraded deco as well, upgraded paint. It was definitely, and the first time they were, and can you imagine, we were all complaining about how they were $4.99 at the time, I think. Yeah, just a more premium line, and that was a little bit of a risk at the time. Nonetheless, so you start with number 1, I think was the Datsun 510. This was also a very hot casting at the time. This one had the BRE, kind of BRE inspired ghost deco on it. All of these models were super clean, which tends to reflect Japan Historics. Actually, all of the Japan Historics afterwards. They tend to be more like street versions of these cars. So you had the Datsun 510. You had the Mazda RX-3 Returns. I think this was the 2nd or 3rd version of this casting that was staying in premium. And then it moved to basic a little bit later on, and very clean mango orange, kind of an homage to the Corolla. The Datsun Z, I think this was Sun King Z. Maybe this had the Skyline taillights on it. Was this Sun King Z? I think this was based on June's car, if I remember correctly. I think this was a different, there was a couple of Zs that were done. And obviously this one might have had smaller wheels as well at the time, but this one had the big 4 spokes on it. And then the 2 new castings, which I think, honestly, make this one of my favorite, and maybe my number 1 Japan Historics mix, but I'll get to that at the end. But very close to it were these 2 castings. One by Junimai, the Laurel. These were such a lean, and I talked about this in the Boulevard mix. Seeing a Nissan Laurel in a Hot Wheels line was such a new thing. We were obviously seeing Japanese cars moving in, but they were more Corollas and Zs, cars that we had seen on American roads. Laurel, you did not see on American roads at all, and this was such a lean in into JDM. And we had the first small rims, of course. So new castings, new rims. Right after this, the Datsun Skyline van was released in the next mix, Cargo Carriers. But we're all of a sudden seeing small wheels. We're seeing real Japanese proportions, that kind of slammed look. And the Laurel was such a surprise. And then Mark Jones designed the C210 Skyline, which is not a really famous Skyline here in the United States as well, and did it in that slammed wide look. Did a really cool detail with the chrome steering wheel with this one too. And this one, I mean, both of these really didn't look like Hot Wheels. They were such a new look for Hot Wheels as well, with all that chrome trim and that really lowered Japanese look with the chrome 4 spokes. It was a very cool line. This one, it sold, I think, pretty well, but it wasn't as hypey, I think, as we started seeing car culture. It's not a great word, but it just like, you had 5 very specific, I guess the 510 at the time people really wanted, but very specific Japanese classic cars. And you can kind of see, like, more so, even though all the Japanese cars were in Japan Historics 1, this one was even more of a lean in. And then came Japan Historics 3. Yeah, this one was your first real car culture or Japan Historics peg warming set. And kind of unfortunate, because you kind of admire Hot Wheels for this. I've said this in the previous part of the video. A lot of times we go, oh, Hot Wheels will just lean into hype cars. You know, those are the things that just, they'll do all these Skylines and things. This was different. More so than even the Laurel, the C210. You had the Cosmo Sport, which is an iconic Japanese car, but maybe not something that a lot of collectors related to. And they did although the bumpers were gone, they did a very factory version of that one, at least in the color. They did the CSP 311 Sylvia, which is also a real, if you know, JDM car. Honda City Turbo, unique, but with an existing casting. The Skyline RS, the R30 was probably the most JDM fanboy, quote unquote. That was a term back in the day. JDM as F word. That kind of vibe. You don't hear that as much anymore, but that was probably the closest to that. But all of these cars were much closer to like New Balance wearing classic car types than younger guys at, you know, I don't know, at a parking lot in a strip mall on a Friday night. Does that make sense? I guess, I hope so. This is the best car of the set in my view. I also like the R30. It was another one that Rio Asada did, then moved to premium for this set, and is an absolute stunner of a car. Done in Jay Coe's car is the one that inspires. You've seen Jay on some of my videos, and his car, he owns this car, still owns it, and Rio based his design on that car, and it's heavy JDM, but also very beautiful. The number 2 car was the Honda City Turbo. Nice to see this one. This is actually based on a real livery. This car actually exists, which was nice to see. That was a cool car, but very much a peg warmer. So is this one, the Silvia. It just didn't have a very exciting color, but that's a pretty accurate color. The wheels, old school Real Riders, but done as close to like that classic wheel. They might use a different wheel these days. But that one was really cool. I think just, when you see this car in person, you realize how pretty it is, but it maybe doesn't translate as much to Hot Wheels Premium. Datsun Sunny was cool. This one falls a little bit closer to the Laurel and C210 with the small 4 spokes, you know, slammed. Kind of looks cool, you know, has that same kind of like real Japanese vibe. Obviously, it's since become a super treasure hunt and others. We've seen it in a bunch of different mixes. And then the Mazda Cosmo Sport, like I said, pure JDM. This one done in a racing style without the bumpers. But also, yeah, it's just not going to pop like some of these others do. This is the one that I think is probably the most admirable mix, but also maybe their biggest miss when it comes to Japan Historics, unfortunately, because it is very, very cool. And I think a set that, you know, like I said, it's more into the true nature of historic classic Japanese cars. And we'll talk about the next mix after this, which is a little bit of that. I guess, yeah, let's just move on to that. All right, this is a bit pathetic because I cannot find the other cars carded of this set. I have the loose cars. We'll go through those. But I only found these two. I couldn't even find the Chase. I know I have the Chase somewhere, but I don't. This one seemed to be a mix of historic Japanese vehicles and a little bit more of like what current JDM aficionados were into. So we'll walk through these. There was a Skyline in the set. It just wasn't maybe the Skyline that folks would expect. The Prince Skyline obviously predates Nissan and is a racing legend for sure, but you know, a little bit different than what we're used to with some of the JDM. But this one is based on the actual racing car, the number 39 in blue, Watanabe rims, really well proportioned. I think Mark Jones did this one. Mark is such a classic racing fan, very appropriate for him to do it. But again, didn't maybe connect with collectors, today's Hot Wheels collector, as maybe others have. These were more Tomica Limited vintage types, I think. Of course, there was the Chase in black, and quite stunning, I thought, with the black Watanabe rims and everything else, but done in a classic Japanese style. So very much close to the previous mix, Japan Historics 3, those two cars. That was a new model. The number 2 model was also, the number 2 car was also a new model, and this one was kind of a mix of both. Corollas, the 72 Toyota Corolla, kind of fit today's JDM passions, but this one was also not your A86, of course, but done in very Japanese style, and obviously the small rims again. You can just see how that just emerged over time. And so if a Japanese car is going to get done, this tends to be how we see it when it comes from that 60s and 70s era. You know, 80s, 90s, very different, but that's how we're going to see these done most of the time, just like the Celica that was just done. Number 3, I'd have to actually look. What was number 3? It was the Nissan Fairlady Z. There it is. Same casting as Japan Historics 2 in yellow, this time with the 6 spokes, so a little bit more modernized. And there might be a pop culture reference, I'll just say that, with this blue Z. There might be a Porsche that might be nicely paired with that, I guess you could say. So there was a little bit of the lean in there. I think Hot Wheels knew what they were doing there. Honda Civic was the next one. This was a Rio Asada design. We've seen it in several lines, but this one was done more like cool Honda Civic, but classic Honda Civic done in a little bit more of a modified version, but also done in a classic color. So a little bit mix of that kind of pure JDM and also a little bit of hype JDM kind of mixed in. You can see the combination of the two. And then finally the RX3 returns for the third time in Japan Historics, but this time they used this classic racing design and leaned into a Liberty Walk version that so looks really good, and it worked well, this casting done as a Liberty Walk. So you got everything from like classic Japanese racing to Liberty Walk, and you can kind of see that combination of the two. And then finally with Japan Historics 4, you can see the evolution. Classic, all of these done. This is like in that same style, like these classic road versions of Japanese cars. And I think there's just always been with these a bit of a lean into kind of a purity, I would say, to classic Japanese cars. And I admire that about Hot Wheels with these. How do I rank these? Well, I'd like to see your rankings, but I would say, just using one car for each, I would say the number 5 position would be Japan Historics 3. The art is also number 5. The mix isn't as exciting, but there's some cool cars in it. There's no duds to me, at least in this mix. So I would say Japan Historics 3 would be my number 5 mix. My number 4 mix, honestly, oh boy, how do I go? Let's see. If I go, that's number 5. Number 4, I think I'm going to go Japan Historics 4. Just because as much as I like it, the art was also not as exciting, I think, as other mixes. And a better mix than 3. But so I think I go 3, 4. I personally would go Japan Historics 1 as number 3. The significance of Japan Historics 1 is much higher than the other mixes, but the assortment isn't as good. The castings aren't as good, and it doesn't have as much of a lean into classics. I would say my number 2 mix is Japan Historics 5, just because I love the art, I love the mix of the cars, and I love the way they're done. But I still don't think anything beats Japan Historics 2. Now I know I will probably be in the minority on this, but I think Japan Historics 2, just the clean colors, the chrome rims on everything but the RX3, and just the debut of this casting and the Laurel. I just think this is the perfect mix of Japan Historic, so that would be my number 1. Of course, my opinion will change tomorrow. You guys tell me what you think. This is a very long video. I apologize for that, but I think it was fun to do. We'll get more into the chase and other things later on, but this one was fun to do. I want all of your opinions on this. You can see I couldn't really pinpoint where to go on this, because you can talk about all the mixes, you can talk about the significance of car culture, you can talk about the significance of chases, you can talk about Japanese cars in general and what era we're in. I could have gone in a million directions, and I kind of went in all of them in a very abbreviated way. But I want all of your thoughts. Where are we on this? Thanks, everybody. Bye.